All right, everyone, I think we can get started. And good afternoon to you. My name is Grant Sprick, and on behalf of the organizing committee and the panel that I will introduce in a few minutes, I have the privilege to welcome you to this interactive webinar where we will explore how do we transition to electric fleets and how that transition will reduce carbon emissions. Today's webinar is the third webinar in our Road to Net Zero webinar series. And if you've missed our first webinar on financing the energy transition or our second webinar on natural capital and climate change, you can catch those recordings on our website at connect.arcadis.com/COP26-webinar-series, as well as on our various social media channels. And following this webinar, we'll have our next webinar on the 10th of December, discussing why social value should be a crucial part of any sustainability strategy. So do join us for that if you have a free hour in your diary. Okay, now on to our topic for today. And as governments around the world set targets to reduce carbon in our atmosphere, it's estimated that by 2025, that's less than 5 years from now, 20% of all cars sold will be electric. Yeah, we've also seen some solid commitments coming out of COP26 with the Glasgow Declaration on Zero Emission Cars and Vans. This will have a huge impact on reducing air pollution, but also lowering running costs and being cheaper to maintain will help generate significant life cycle cost savings. And this cost benefit will only improve over time as the technology advances. So big organizations with big fleets like the Metropolitan Police and many central government departments are already making real transition to electric vehicles. And with government targets coming into play, we can expect more businesses to follow suit. And just think about the infrastructure expansion, the commuting behavior change, and the data sharing required to make this a reality. This will not be an easy feat. So how ready are countries around the world to adopt electric vehicles? And Arcadis's new EV Catalyst research ranks country readiness and explores what we can learn from other countries who are leading the way. So as part of our Road to COP26 webinar series, we've assembled this panel of industry experts to share their views on the transition to EVs in their various countries. Today, during our conversation, we will touch on issues and topics like what the perfect EV situation looks like, how government, business, consumers, users, and other stakeholders need to come together, unlocking financing, and we'll also touch on the panel's views on what must be done now and the blockers preventing it from happening at scale. So quite some rich conversation ahead. Now, before I bring in our panel, and I promise I will stop talking soon, just some logistics and housekeeping. You may already be thinking, will the slides for this session be made available? Well, that answer is no, because there are no slides. You can't accuse us of death by a PowerPoint on this webinar. No. Because this conversation, this webinar is a conversation. Consider it a fireside chat, if you will. Then you may be thinking, well, what's the best way to interact during this session? Well, on this WebEx, there's a Q&A field. So please feel free to type in your questions during the event. And I will do my best to pick up those questions during the conversation as well, and try to keep this as real time as possible. Lastly, I ask that you enjoy the session. In the virtual audience, we have quite a diverse group joining today. We have representatives from the energy, food, finance, transportation, government, property, consultancy, and industrial sectors here with us, confirming again that this topic, our topic today, is quite important. So to explore the main topic today, we have a great panel for you. And what I will do now is introduce each of the panel quickly, and then we'll continue on with the first question. And as I introduce maybe the panelists, you can just give a wave, a hello, a thumbs up. That would be excellent. All right, first off, we have Simon Swan, who's our Future Mobility Senior Director at Arcadis. And he's been delivering EV strategy and EV charging solutions since 2013 and is currently leading our EV propositions. He has over 20 years of experience delivering projects and programs across a variety of sectors and focuses on ensuring clients get the solutions that they need. The climate emergency means we now need to accelerate transport decarbonization, and Simon is an expert at delivering zero emission solutions. Welcome, Simon. Second, we have Yuan Shi, who is our global solution leader of new mobility at Arcadis. She also has a background in urban data science, and her work focuses on the nexus of sustainable transportation and smart city technology, with experiences and leadership provided on a wide variety of topics, including electric vehicle infrastructure, zero emission fleet transition, travel demand management, multimodal mobility planning, micromobility, mobility as a service. Yuan, great to have you. Thank you very, very much for being here. Next, we have Giles Platel, who's the head of commercial fleets at EO Charging. And in that role, he's working to expand EO's key partnerships and provide ongoing consultation services to a wide variety of businesses. And previously, he has the experience in securing and delivering public-facing EV charging contracts with UK realtors, including Tesco and Lidl. Next, we have Jan O'Hara, Managing Director and co-founder at Level Telematics. And for the last 4 years, he's worked as Managing Director and co-founder, which Level Telematics was formed to become the market-leading provider of electric vehicle transition. And they're also a part of a larger EV solution ecosystem with major suppliers like Arcadis, Maxus, Drive Electric, Nissan, Eon, Vinci, EO, Mina, Flock, and others. So Jan, very great to have you here as well. Finally, we have Rob Maurits, who's been working as a policy advisor at the Sustainable Mobility Program of the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management since June of this year. Here, he works on the implementation of the Dutch Climate Agreement, including the promotion of zero emission mobility. And Rob is specifically involved in the tax and financial incentives for zero emission passenger cars. He also works in the team which is responsible for the rollout of charging infrastructure and accompanying policy for promotion of net zero emission mobility. Wow, what a fantastic panel. A truly wide array of skill sets. Looking forward to this discussion. So let's start to engage our panel, shall we? And this is also an opportunity for you to expand on the brief introduction that I just gave. And I want each of you, we'll go around the virtual room here, to share what your perspective is on this topic. You know, what are you doing at the moment? What makes you tick when you think about EV fleet transition? And Simon, I'm going to start with you. Can you kick us off on that one?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. So we started working back in 2013. We were working with Nissan when they introduced the Nissan Leaf, developing the infrastructure because it was a true chicken and egg scenario. They wanted to sell more cars, but there wasn't any infrastructure. So we helped them roll out that infrastructure. And since then, we've been working across many different sectors, from retail, defence, police forces, transit authorities, automakers, and we've been providing consultancy and design and engineering solutions. And we have three key solutions in terms of EV. We have EV strategy, where we're helping councils in Wales and Scotland and England work out what they need to do to embrace electrification, and logistics firms around Europe, for example, and understanding the impact of ultra low emission vehicle zones. And the second one is EV workplace and destination solutions, where we're helping organisations understand what infrastructure might be needed for their employees, for example, but we're also providing high power charging hubs across Europe as well, which pretty much does what it says on the tin. It's high power, very fast charging. So that's what we've been working on, Grant.
Great, thanks, Simon. Giles, I'm very keen to hear from you. What are you working on these days? What makes you tick?
Yeah, no, thanks, Grant. So from EO's perspective, we're very much about making the customer journey to electrification as easy as possible. So it's really about breaking down those barriers that you have when you try and electrify not just a couple of vehicles, but certainly when you talk about a fleet, of hundreds, if not thousands of vehicles, then that becomes a much bigger problem, or not a problem, but a much bigger challenge for those businesses. So it's really about coming up with solutions that can help make that transition as seamless as possible. So at EO, we look at providing a full turnkey solution. So that's right from the start of providing the strategy. So very similar to what Arcadis are doing with their customers. So what do you need to do to electrify your fleet today, but also tomorrow? And then we go right the way through from doing the installation. We can install more power supply if needed for those sites. So we can do grid upgrades. We then provide the hardware, the software, the installation services, and then also the maintenance ongoing. So we don't just install the chargers and walk away. We're actually looking after that infrastructure, after it's been installed. And I think that for me is really a neat solution, particularly for customers that are new to this territory, new to EV. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and really, from EO's perspective, that's what we want to be there to do, is to support them and make sure it's as seamless for them as possible.
Yeah, I think that's great. You also articulated the challenge around the infrastructure needs and also the commuter and user behavior advancements that are required. And I know that very well myself, because we just now have an EV vehicle, and just learning a new way to move around was a bit challenging for me. Maybe we can explore all those topics a bit later. But Rob, I'm going to come over to you now. Very curious to hear what's on your mind.
Well, as you told in the introduction, and thank you for having me over here, we've got a quite ambitious goal in the Netherlands. We want 100% zero emission of new sales passenger cars in 2030. So it's 5 years sooner than the European Union proposal, and the Fit for 55 proposal is standing over this moment. And at this point, we think we are only halfway. So about 45% of our new sales will be zero emission in 2030. And that's a lot to do at this moment. So that's on top of mind. And my team is responsible not only to stimulate the electric vehicles within the Netherlands, but also the upcoming charging infrastructure, because you both need them, because when there's no charging infrastructure, there won't be as much vehicles. So it's the chicken and the egg discussion we always hear. So this is our main goal, and it's quite ambitious, but I hope we will get there, because we need this to achieve our Paris Agreement for zero emission ambitions. So yeah, it will be a great job.
Yeah, that is very ambitious, and we need first movers, and the Netherlands is clearly one of those first movers indeed. Thank you very much. Jan, over to you.
Sure, okay. So we love data, right? So we work with an organization called Geotab, who are the largest telematics organization in the world. We collect the data from what the fleets are currently doing, so the ICE fleets, and provide an electric vehicle suitability assessment so we can look at which vehicles can and can't move to electric at the appropriate time. We've also built an ecosystem so we can ensure that all of the elements of the transition are managed correctly with good working partners, so the delivery to an organisation is good. And we've already transitioned numerous fleets in the UK. It starts off small and then grows over a period of time, because you can't boil the ocean in one day. Fleets can't transition all at one point, okay? And one of the other things, as I said earlier, we're working now with some OEM partners, so Maxus being one, SAIC, so Chinese manufacturer, who are delivering vans into the UK market in volume, and they're now coming connected with the technology from Geotab. What we also do is once the vehicles are in place and in use, we help people operate electric. So we look at the relationship between the vehicle and the charge infrastructure and can provide support, making sure that the two parts work hand in glove. And then lastly, with the same technology, we enable customers to scale electric. So we enable customers to take the data, look at which vehicles can move to EV, and then operate at a much larger scale as well. And we're doing that quite successfully with companies and integrations with companies like Giles is on from EO as well, and other organizations. So yeah, that's what we're doing. And that's what keeps us awake.
Thank you, Jan. Doing the good work indeed. Now let's head over to Yuan, and thank you as well, because I know it's late in your day, but really appreciate you being live with us all the way from Shenzhen. Awesome.
Well, thank you for having me. And my work at Arcadis is around new mobility. And new mobility comes down to two key themes, essentially, technology and sustainability. And I really see EV as a key component in sustainable mobility. Sustainable mobility is much broader topic. We are advocating, encouraging like modal shift, such as active mobility, public transport, but still vehicle is still a very important component in all the mobility solutions today we have for moving goods and moving people. So electric vehicles can really help us reduce emissions when we have to use cars or when we have to use vehicles. And we are working on those advisory services to help clients to plan for EV charging networks, and also policy advisory, how to encourage people to change their behaviors. So when it comes to EV specifically, how to promote EV transition with better user experiences so drivers will be willing to make the transition, and also make it cost effective for those who are investing in those infrastructure. So that is what I'm working on, and happy to share more later.
Yeah, thank you for that. And what I've experienced is once you get behind the wheel of an EV and you drive it, you don't want to go back. Yeah. But thank you very much. So lots of experience and lots of credibility indeed. And Simon, I'm going to hand the next question over to you. And Yuan she mentioned carbon emissions reduction opportunities with EV, right? Very obvious in terms of the like driving the vehicle. But I'd like you to kind of put on your your magic hat, get your crystal ball, put together your wish list for Santa Claus. What does the future look like? The best case scenario, right? What's the end state vision? And then with that, what are the opportunities for carbon emissions reduction in that end state vision, right? What are we aiming towards?
Yeah. Okay. So look, fully decarbonisation of the transport system and all vehicles, and that's everything from your cars and your vans, of course, but also we need to think of hydrogen fueled aircraft, battery electric vehicles from urban air mobility and skyports linking cities across Europe, eliminating polluting short distance flights at the moment. And we've got to think about the damage to, you know, the ports and marine environment at the moment that continues at a pace, you know, from internal combustion engines. And we're seeing now the development of early networks of superchargers in the marine and port environments as well. So yeah, the electrification of cars and buses and vans, but we've got to think wider than that. We've got to look at the jet to zero, as it's called, and the marine environment. But the benefits are going to be for all of us. The benefits in our cities, for example, is going to be significant, with 7 million people die every year from air pollution. If we can eliminate these tailpipe emissions, then we're going to see significant benefits in our cities with the reduction of particulate matter and nitrous oxide and other poisonous gases that come out of the tailpipe. And this doesn't just go for the big vehicles. Look, it's about removing the number of vehicles on the roads and promoting active travel as well. This morning I was driving my electric bike with my 7-year-old on the back, and London are introducing low traffic neighbourhoods at the moment, and everyone is now travelling down these really, really busy but very congested streets. And how wonderful will it be in the future when the vehicles that are on the road aren't emitting any poisonous gases, and I won't have to have my 7-year-old on the back with a mask on. So I think the future is looking bright and clean, but there's a long way to go.
Yeah, you paint a lovely picture, Simon. Superchargers at marine locations, jet to zero, as you say, low traffic neighborhoods. The benefits are quite clear as well, like particulates in air reduction, if not elimination. But Rob, I've got the next question for you, if you don't mind. Again, a lovely picture, yes, but what in your mind, like, how do we get there, right? What are the next most important things that we need to do to make, for example, low traffic neighborhoods or these other elements that Simon talked about happen?
Well, I think there are two parallel paths. I think we need regulation, so it's the stick. So I think governments, they will have to tell people they have to change, and they have to make regulation or bans, or they have to subscribe to do things. For example, in the Netherlands, we need the European Commission to tell our member states what to do. So, for example, the ban of ICEs in 2035. This will help us to accelerate the upcoming electric vehicle transition. And the other side, it's the incentive side, or the carrot, because in the Netherlands we see that the Dutch incentives they work very good. So we have a subsidy scheme for private people to buy cars. So that's an example which can help us to get to those electric cars. But it's not only cars, because Simon already told it's everything. It's our houses, it's our mobility, it's our industry. So
yeah.
It's a lot. So, but I think also there will be regulation and incentives. Those two things will help us, I think, and especially within the electric vehicles stimulation. I think the European Commission will help us, but it won't be enough, because some countries and member states, they want to go faster. And some member states, like the Netherlands, and some other countries, they have their big industries who still want to sell internal combustion engine cars. So it's quite difficult to achieve this, but I think we will manage this if we get this together, those two paths.
Yeah, yeah, well said. Does anyone want to build on that?
Yeah, hi, Grant. If I may, we've just obviously we've just launched our global EV catalyst index, and we sort of summarise the three catalysts to getting to the end place by government incentives and leadership. That's really important. So grants, policies, regulations, things like the ultra low emission vehicle zones, but also we need to see improvement in the EV market as well. There must be more affordable electric vehicles. There needs to be more EV models on the road. You know, there's thousands and thousands of EVs, of diesel and petrol cars available at the moment. Different models, but there's only sort of 400 EV models available. And then the third part of it is the EV infrastructure. You need to have the right infrastructure installed in the right place at the right time, and it's got to be accessible, and it's got to be affordable as well. So that's how we've described the, you know, how we get there. To that end scenario. It's the government leadership, the EV market, and the EV infrastructure as well.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. And Ewan, I'm going to move the conversation over to you to explore, let's say, why certain countries' governments are ahead of others. Rob mentioned the need for regulation, incentives, grants, but there are obviously countries in front, countries behind. And what kind of sets these countries apart from one another? Why are certain decisions made and not made?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So Simon just mentioned the three catalysts that can drive this transition. And I would say among the three, government regulation and government commitment is the most important one. And once the government is committed, once there is regulation and incentives in place, the industry will follow. The OEMs, they're gonna start to figure out how to increase the capacity in their plants to produce more EVs. And also the charging industry gonna figure out how to put more charging on street. So this really is the key to drive everything. And to your question, why some countries are better at this, some might lag behind, I would say it's a very, very difficult combination of situation. Sometimes it's because the existing industry in those countries, like for example, in China, in Germany, where car production is very important to GDP, then there will be a lot of concerns when all of a sudden there is a policy change to switch the direction of the industry. And on the other side, I would say it's the interest of sustainability in the leadership as well, among politicians as well. Is sustainability itself a good story for the campaigns, for elections? It can also help the citizens to see what is the ambition they jointly have for the country, right? So sometimes we see, like, for example, in France, Green Party getting more and more popular, it means sustainability has become more trendy, and then politicians are more interested to advocate for those sustainable policy. So I would say it's a very difficult answer to a very difficult question to answer in short sentences, but it's a combination of a lot of situations.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see sustainability and EV being used a bit like a political football, as we would say in the US, some political leverage. Very interesting. I mean, I've lived in China a while back, and I saw just overnight, bam, all these EV vehicles all over the place. And I live now in the Netherlands, and I look at my charging map in Europe, and there's a center of mass in the Netherlands. You just kind of scratch your head, like, why is this? But it's very fascinating, this current situation that we're in and the opportunity that we have ahead. Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, it's interesting you say that, because we work with some central and local government areas, and they're transitioning the vehicles that are most visible to electric. So it's interesting your comment that you're seeing more electric vehicles, and in local government, they're getting the vehicles that are not necessarily the right vehicles to transition based on mileage and total cost of ownership, but based on visibility. So it's a political decision as well. And for as you just said, that you're seeing more, their constituents, the residents are seeing more electric vehicles. So they're showing everybody that they take sustainability seriously, and they're using that transitional journey as a start point. So it's a really interesting point.
Wow. Do you all feel that there's a particular government initiative or strategy that supports this transition better than others, right? Is it really regulation that's in pole position, or is it the incentives that are provided? Like if a country wanted to do one thing differently, where can they get the biggest bang for their buck? This is not a question we talked about earlier, but anyone interested in tackling that one? Yaron, go ahead. I saw your hand first.
I'll answer the first part. Simon's probably going to say the same thing, but in the business space, so the business fleet space, government incentive based on tax is a massive driver in the UK about getting people to transition back into company vehicles when everyone's transitioned away from company vehicles over the last 15 years. So a government incentive in tax has been a massive driver for company car drivers here in the UK.
Wow. Johan, did you want to add on that?
Yeah, I want to add something different. We know a lot of initiatives like financial supports for customers when they purchase cars, when they purchase EV, or when people want to install chargers, there are gonna be rebate programs. I want to add something different, like supporting initiatives I've seen. So, for example, in Norway, EV can drive on tax in bus lanes, and sometimes they can park for free. And when drivers are comparing the cost of EV versus fossil fuel cars, those kind of little things will weigh in, help them make the sustainable decision. And in China, there are also a lot of initiatives to encourage EV adoption as well, like requiring new buildings to install EV chargers at parking lots. And I also see the news yesterday, the UK also announced that starting next year, new buildings will be required to install EV chargers as well. And also the city I'm living in, Shenzhen, it's a mega city in southern China. There are a lot of programs related to bus and taxi electrifications. And I find this is quite unique globally. So Shenzhen Bus Group operates the largest e-bus fleet in the world with more than 20,000 electric buses, which is an enormous number. And the transition started in 2008. And there was a huge government funding support to the bus transit agency to help them start the pilots, start the transition, and also for the taxi transition. At the beginning, the drivers were all concerned. If I need to park my car there to get recharged, then that means I'm running like less time and it's gonna reduce my revenue. Why should I transition, right? And a little context here, for all the taxis, the drivers need to pay the monthly medallion fee, like tax. And the city introduced the electric taxi medallion, which is much cheaper than the fossil fuel taxi medallion. So in this case, this is making up for the lost revenue for the drivers. And when the drivers do the math, they realize, oh, I'm actually not making less money, but I have extra breaks during the day to get my car recharged. So why don't I make the change? So those kind of little things during those in the decision-making points, they really help people to think about, is EV better or is the ICE vehicles better? Should I make the switch? And I think these kind of little initiatives during, it's actually not little, those kind of initiatives thinking about human behaviors, thinking about human decision process can really make the impact.
Yeah, great example. When you think life cycle, total cost of ownership, let's say, you can really evaluate those, say, capital costs versus operational costs and those benefits. And maybe at the end of the day, EV is just a better decision financially as well. Very cool. Thank you for that, Jan. So,
Just before
yeah,
we
Simon,
just before
please.
we go on, the
Yeah.
other important point is that demonstrating government leadership is obviously hugely important. And one of the things that we've found very effective is by the government announcing a ban on their own fleet of vehicles and a date as to when they need to be transitioned over to electric. And in the UK, that's by 2027. Clearly, demonstrating how you do it, leading from the front, introducing those sort of bans are going to be really, really impactful. And they're the sort of fleets that we're supporting now in trying to help them understand how they're going to meet that date by 2027, or in many cases, much, much sooner than that.
Yeah. So we have these commitment dates. Yuan, you mentioned 20,000 e-buses in Shenzhen. But isn't there a gap on technology or availability? And, I feel like businesses would want to wait, until that technology is in place. But really, they should be starting now, right? Yuan, can I ask you to expand on that point?
Yeah, I would say, depending on the use cases, this may not be something we have to wait anymore. The technology is already there. And this really is the question we oftentimes heard from our clients. Like, should we wait until the battery technology gets better, or should we wait until more medium or heavy duty vehicles available out there in the market? And I would say, depending on the use cases, let's see what can be done today. So if the services can be fulfilled by electric cars or electric buses, I would say most of the use cases today are already there with the existing technology. We can help you figure out how to pull it off. And if your use cases is run medium and heavy duty vehicles, then we can still take some actions today to get the journey started. There are still a lot to do. So in order to make the transition of medium heavy duty fleet, we need to collect operational data starting today. This information will build over time. Those kind of operational information, such as are those cars or are those vehicles coming back to the depot, back to the facility every day, or do they operate in multiple locations and park in different facilities, or do they have routes or not? Those kind of operational data should accumulate over time, and also understand real estate portfolios. There will be additional space and energy capacity requirements needed for facilities to accommodate chargers to charge those medium heavy duty vehicles. Even though the technology might not be there yet, like the medium heavy duty vehicles doesn't provide us a lot of choices, doesn't provide us a lot of models today in the market, in the car markets. But overall, we know those space requirements and energy requirements will still be relevant in the next few years. So we need to start to understand the real estate portfolio, collect the data information on that, and also, if needed, we also need to upgrade the energy grid capacity to allow future upgrade when we are ready. So there are still a lot of work to do to understand the fleet, to understand the operation, understand your real estate assets before actually we can make the switch at the vehicle level. So I would say there are still plenty to do. We don't have to wait.
Yeah, Giles, please build on that.
Yeah, no, just to add to that, I think a lot of the businesses that are adopting electric vehicles today are actually going to see the benefits tomorrow, even with the change of technology. And that comes down to the learnings that they're going to take from trying to implement electric chargers and electric vehicles. They're going to take a huge amount of learnings. And that will only enforce the next stage, which will be, you know, if we look far ahead into the future, you know, wireless, autonomous vehicles maybe. All of these things that they're doing now will help inform that future. And I think the people that don't do that and they keep waiting and waiting, I think they're going to be the ones that actually end up losing out a lot of the time. So really, I think as an example, Tesco's, we're doing 5 sites with them at the moment across the UK to electrify their .com delivery vehicles. They've made a few mistakes along the way, but they've learned a hell of a lot from making those mistakes. And I think when we come to do the next stage, they're going to be in a much better place, regardless of whether the technology has moved on or not. So I think it's really important to drive home that yes, the technology is changing, but it will put you in a much better place if you start earlier rather than later, moving forward.
Wow. So I'm just reviewing the chat here as well, and there's some very interesting comments and questions coming in. And I'm gonna bite. I'm gonna bite, and maybe I'll regret it. But from everyone on the call, quick show of hands, who's driving an EV vehicle? Nice, interesting. So we all are on a journey, indeed. Yes. Thank you.
It's a Grant. It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Because the EV market is so immature in places that it's not actually possible to drive an EV for some uses. So, for example, I've got 4 children. There isn't an affordable, available electric vehicle for me at the moment. I drive an electric bike to reduce my miles, but there isn't actually a 7-seater that's on the market now that is genuinely affordable. And so I do like listening to this question where possible, and if we're doing suitable journeys, especially with work, then we use an EV. But the market is still immature, and until we've got more models, it's going to be it's not going to be 100% yet, of course. So it's still early days. I think 10% in the UK of all new car sales are EV, but with more models available and more choice, then that's going to increase.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that. I also bet some people don't even have cars at all.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Yes. John, go ahead.
I'm just going back to the point of, is technology available today? So we're already deploying large-scale EV transition programs for lots of fleets. Will people wait? I think it'd be like the mobile phone market, 2, 3, 4, 5G. You know, there are going to be some countries that are going to wait and they want faster charging, better infrastructure, longer range vehicles. But for right now, fleets looking to change, and you know, in terms of the cars and the van market, they can absolutely do that. And the data that's gathered and the data that exists in the market, not just in one place, one silo, this is all about collaboration, and it's working with different partners across the whole industry to bring all of that data together so the customers can make informed decisions. And I know that we were working with Simon and his team on the fleet to zero side of things. And that's kind of bringing all the data sets together to show people that they can do it today, or what they can do today, and then a plan for the future as well. So that was kind of the bit for me.
Yeah, and sharing data must be a immensely challenging thing. I mean, Yuan talked about the importance of starting to collect operational data now, but even better if we can collect that and also share it. And it makes me think about a question that was asked in the chat. One of the audience members here recently, last summer, with their family, experienced the fast charging network in France with their Kia e-Niro, and was quite disappointed in that experience. And the question is, well, how can we stimulate governments to follow the Dutch EV infrastructure roadmap? Again, the Netherlands doing it right. So how can we share that data and that experience across multiple countries? How can we be better at that? Maybe Rob, go ahead.
Well, I don't know as much about it as my colleagues, but I do know there is an international program within a national European program to share our insights. And we do have some collaboration at this moment, for example, with the Germans, but also I thought also with France. So we do want to share our knowledge, how we roll out our infrastructure. But yeah, everyone is very busy, so we want to exchange this information, but we don't find the time at this moment. So it's really difficult because we're quite busy to do this within our own country. And it's the same for the Germans, and it's the same for the people from France. So that's why the international exchange isn't at that point there what we want. But
Yeah.
the ambition is there.
Yeah. Yeah. Jan, please.
I mean, success will look like there's a new standard in charging, and I'm sure that Giles will be able to tell us what that standard is. But in terms of, you know, an electric vehicle driver, you want to drive up and just plug your car in, it just connects and charges you and bills you. You know, that doesn't kind of exist today. And I think in the future, that's what the success will look like, you know, where it's just automatic. We're not worrying about fobs and apps and all the things that we have to go through today, the pain that we suffer whilst charging our cars on public charge points. You know, all those things should disappear, and I think will disappear over the coming months or years anyway. And then I think lastly for fleet, you know, we're looking at a fleet-only charging infrastructure where you're going to be able to schedule a charge session in your route and make sure that the charge point is available and working as well. And again, that's another thing in terms of making it easier for drivers of fleet vehicles to be able to charge in a charge bay where your vehicle fits. So we've had charge bays which are made for cars. Well, the vans don't fit. The charge cable doesn't fit. And a van pulls into the charge point and connects and takes up 3 charge bays, and then everybody hates them. So, you know, there are challenges ahead, but that was my point. Sorry, Giles.
Yeah. Well, just before I hand it over to Giles, just a funny story. Outside of my house, there's a charge point, and for 3 days there was a regular ICE car parked there, and man, I got triggered. I was really upset. I even called the gemeente, the local municipality. Like I was that guy. Ugh. But Giles, like this thought of you know, not having multiple LADPAS and like fobs and all of this in my wallet, that is really exciting. Is that a possibility, you think, regarding the infrastructure?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the way the market's going, the way it should go. I think if you look back at how we've got to this place where you've got fobs and cards and apps and different passwords and, you know, all these different access methods, I think the aim was not to put too many limitations on the market. So you know, from a government perspective, they did not want to put too much policy in place to say, you know, all of the charge point operators have to communicate via a common language, which would enable access or one means of access across multiple networks. What they wanted to actually do was stimulate competition and actually find out what is the best way of accessing a charge point. You know, is it through an app? Is it using a card? What's the best way of doing that? And I think by not having a policy in place for one means of access has meant that competition has been allowed to flourish. And actually, there's been some really great solutions that have come out from that. That said, moving forward, as the market develops, then yeah, absolutely, I think there needs to come a point where you know, there's a line, and we do look to through policy from government to implement a consistent way of accessing the charges, and that will likely be through OCPP, which is the Open Charge Point Protocol, which is basically a common language that the charges and a lot of the back offices can communicate through, and that should then in turn allow interoperability between the different charge point operators, and then we'll get to a place where yes, you will just have one means of access. That said, there are companies looking to do that already. So we work with a business called Mina, who are part of Fuel Card or All-Star. And we actually provide a card which gives you access to 15 different networks across the UK. So that includes Shell, Instavolt, EO, ESB in Ireland. So lots of different networks, and you just use one single card, and that will give you access to all of those networks. So there are already work streams going on to help address that, but I think we've still definitely got some way to go. You know, PodPoint, BP, ChargeMaster, some of the biggest networks in the UK, they have a different means of access. That you have to subscribe to ChargeMaster. With PodPoint, you have to download their app. So yeah, there's definitely still some work to go.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you're on the case. Excellent. Thank you for that. I did want to address maybe one elephant in the room, and that's batteries. Yeah. And I think there's lots of opportunity with batteries for technological development, but there's some negative stuff associated with batteries, specifically end of life disposal or reuse. Just what's your perspective around that? And Jan, I'm going to come to you first to share your thoughts on what's the future for batteries.
So I think battery technology is evolving very quickly now. We had a big stagnant period of it for quite a while. So battery technology is getting better and better and better all the time. At Geotab, they've been monitoring battery degradation for the last 8 years. So we've got a toolkit that enables us to look at the degradation of a battery and pass that information back and share it openly with everybody to show the degradation curve based on temperature of the battery, charge cycles, all of those sort of things. So we can look at, first of all, the degradation of a battery, time, how long it will take to degrade. The next thing that we have is a thing called state of health, which is being built out at the moment. So battery state of health will be one of the major things which will decide the value, the second life value of the vehicle. So when you come to sell your second-hand EV, the battery state of health, which is probably the most expensive part of the vehicle, as long as we can tell what the state of health is, we'll then decide the valuation of that vehicle, okay? And then when the battery goes end of life, there's lots of companies already, second life battery companies, who are removing the batteries from vehicles and putting them into people's homes or into businesses. So we then have battery storage capability for things like solar, local power generation, having the ability to store the energy locally and use it at the time when it's best needed. So I think, you know, it's a new emerging market as well. There's lots to do. We're seeing it in action already. So we work on a project up in the Orkney Islands and with a company called Reflex Orkney, where they've decarbonised the entire island. They've now got EVs running around the island, and they generate 140% of their power already locally. So they're using battery storage to store that power, and then again use it for other things locally as well. So yeah, I think there's interesting markets to come out of it, and then eventually we've been reading more things about when they break the battery down about what that looks like as well. So
yeah, and what do you think the timeline is from that kind of process and thinking to become more mainstream in first moving countries? How far away are we from, you know, better, more efficient recycling of batteries?
It depends which country you're talking about, because we see lots of reports and the media like to spin a story about how bad and where they're all being put into landfill already and then building schools. There's a lot of horror stories that we're seeing already, okay?
Yeah.
But I think, you know, the world has changed, really, with COVID came along as well, and the world has changed, and everybody's starting to care about the world significantly more than they did pre-COVID. So we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, just from my side, I think Simon's probably got a better perspective on this. But from our side of things, I think, you know, every company who makes something is finding better ways of disposing it at end of life as well.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Jan. There's a question that came into the chat from Srikanth, and I think it's a good one. And Rob, I think it's one that you can address, and it's regarding the rebates on EVs. And are there thoughts on the issuance of subsidies for EVs for higher income classes, for example, versus lower income classes? How can we make EVs more accessible to a wider population? Is that something that you can respond to, Rob?
Yes, I can, I think. In the Netherlands, we've got a subsidy scheme for both type of electric vehicles, so 100% electric. Those are the new ones. and also second-handed. We import a lot of second-handed EVs because of our subsidy scheme in the Netherlands. You get 2,000 euros for a second-handed EV, and we only stimulate the EVs with an original price between 12,000 euros and 45,000 euros. So if the car originally was more expensive than 45,000 euros, then you don't get a subsidy. So that's our way to stimulate only the small compact EVs and not the expensive ones. It's a little bit arbitrary to choose the 45,000 euros, but that's where we started, and I think it went great because well, it went a little bit too. We stopped our subsidy after a week because our subsidy amount of money it was empty already. So next year it will be a much bigger amount of subsidy, 71 million euros. So we've got a little bit more money to spend on. But this is our way to help people as well with a second-handed electric vehicle, and not only the new ones, because that's something we hear a lot, that we only stimulate the people who've got the money to buy new cars. And that's a big political problem in the Netherlands, because we only helping the rich people. And if the electric vehicle is more get normalized in the future, then the people don't get anything anymore from the government, because they couldn't buy a new one. So that's why we choose to stimulate as well the second-handed cars at this moment.
Yeah. Fascinating. Thank you for that. We're almost at the top of the hour, which means we just about have to close our session. And there's a couple of great questions that have come up in the Q&A. I especially like the one around the environmental impact of batteries. And as a society, we seem to focus more on the positive carbon reduction side of things, but what about the other side of things, right? And I know that there's quite some opportunities in making that, let's say, rare earth metal extraction less necessary or more efficient. We don't have time to get into that right now, but that is a great question, and apologies that we don't have time to answer it. But to take us out, I'd like to quickly go around the table, and recognizing that COP26 has just concluded, what are your thoughts around COP26 and the commitments made there? Or what do you think is most urgently needed to progress EV transition? And Simon, if I can start with you again, please.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. Well, look, I mean, I think it wasn't entirely the success that we were all hoping that it would be, but there was some good that came out of COP26, in particular countries like India setting a net zero target, I think by 2017, wasn't it? It was maybe 20 years after everyone else, but at least they're working towards something, and the commitment to end coal use as well, or at least strive towards ending it, was a good thing as well. But we've seriously got a huge amount of work to do, and we need to undertake a whole load of actions to get there. We need to start doing stuff and stop using fossil fuels in particular. The energy transition piece is probably the most important, and the tax breaks for the fossil industry, for example.
Yeah, here. Yuan, quick thoughts on COP26 or what we urgently need to do?
On COP26, one thing I find it not so promising is the car manufacturers in countries. Some of them declined to sign the agreement to make zero-emission vehicle by 2040, and I think this is something we should jointly committed to. It's to contribute to sustainability globally, and we cannot leave certain automakers out or leave certain countries out. It's for our benefits altogether, essentially. So yeah.
Great. Thank you, Jan. Giles.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to be selfish and talk sort of about the industry that affects me most. So fleet operators, I think there was lots of great commitment from governments and business to strive to reduce the use of petrol diesel vehicles by 2035 or 2030 in leading countries. So I think those type of commitments are really great. I think the only downside is it's mainly geared around leading markets and not everywhere. But appreciate that leading markets is perhaps the place where we should start, and then that will filter down through to everyone else as we move forward. But yeah, I think some good commitment certainly from a fleet perspective. I think it was a good outcome.
Great, thanks, Giles. Rob, your closing thoughts?
Well, I think I don't have much to add to, but I think small steps are better than no steps. So I think we should look at this positively instead of negatively, because it's always you want more, but you don't always get what you want. So let's hope for stick together and get this done, and hopefully we'll get a lot of EVs in the future and save our climate.
Great, thank you, Rob. And finally, Jan.
Okay, I think COP for me personally was disappointing, massively disappointing, because we could have gone a lot further. So it really opens up an opportunity for everybody else to go further, faster together and make a real difference to the planet. But that's kind of my closing remark.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thanks to all of you for a riveting 1 hour of discussion. That was 60 minutes gone by really fast, and apologies for going slightly over as well. Thank you to those who have stuck around. Thank you to all on the call for joining. I hope the session was amazing for you. Do join us on the 10th of December, I believe it is, for our final webinar in this series around social impact. Thanks again, and I'll see you there. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Thanks, Grant.